Track Talk is returning to 1830 with a game played by Grimaldus, Leeson, BSNRLL, and Phoenix. We'll have to abbreviate BS's name to make it a little more pronounceable. I will just comment that Leeson is playing a ton of 1830, a lot of these games live, so he's going to be in potentially quite a few commentated games if we continue to do 1830. Grimaldus, he's leading us off in the auction. Will be taking on the Camden and Amboy. Leeson, happy to join him. BS, taking the Mohawk and Hudson. Phoenix, joining him. So two companies with split auctions. Grimaldus going for the D&H. May make it hard for him to price enforce on the Camden and Amboy, but probably motivated to not just rely on getting the Camden and Amboy, so needs to bid on something else. Because if he only leaves the auction with the opportunity for the Camden and Amboy, could be paying very high price for that private. Leeson, a third player on the Mohawk and Hudson. I think whenever you're the third player on a private, you have to be a little bit careful that you don't give the first player the opportunity for a quick pass, and then you're left potentially bidding up a private that you didn't really want to be involved with in the first place. BS, he is also joining the Camden and Amboy. Phoenix, going on the D&H, so we have a pretty crowded auction already. And we have a quick pull. Grimaldus pulls the Schuylkill. That's going to give him $5 income, makes it less likely that he'll end up with a B&O, and he will, I guess, be competing just for the D&H and the Camden Amboy. If he wins either of those privates, should be in a pretty good spot. So makes sense for him to pull there. Leeson, on the other hand, is he looking to just snap up the Champlain and St. Lawrence and bring this auction to a quick close? He might. It's going to make it a little bit harder for him to enforce on the Camden Amboy, but he could potentially pass out of it early. The problem with that, relying on that, is the Grimaldus might pass out before he does, and then there would be no price enforcement on the Camden Amboy. I think we'll probably see Leeson buy the Champlain and St. Lawrence. It's a face value private, usually pretty worthwhile. But he needs to be careful by investing his cash early. It's going to make it harder to afford one of these more expensive permanents or privates, and he might end up with the B&O and the Champlain and St. Lawrence if he isn't careful. He's going to pass, actually, allow someone else to spend their liquidity on the Champlain and St. Lawrence. BS, he's in a pretty analogous situation to Leeson in terms of the privates he's on. I don't imagine he passes, though, so he does pull. We're on the D&H. This is between Phoenix and Grimaldus. Phoenix is on this and the Mohawk and Hudson. I think he'd be happy to give it a good try for the D&H, but he has a escape valve in the Mohawk and Hudson, so he doesn't have to pay super high for the D&H, I don't think. Grimaldus, on the other hand, is pretty motivated to win the D&H and just immediately pass out of the Camden Amboy, I imagine. Bidding 85, Phoenix 90, Grimaldus 95, and they're going to take it up to 110 already, at which point Grimaldus passes. So Grimaldus needs to win the Camden Amboy probably, or just can't let Leeson get it, because if Grimaldus doesn't win the Camden Amboy and Leeson does, Leeson will be leaving with the Camden Amboy in priority into the first stock round. We're looking at the Mohawk and Hudson, Phoenix having just won the D&H for a pretty reasonable price. I mean, not necessarily overpaying, but certainly paying about as much as I'd want to. Probably does not want to win the Mohawk and Hudson. BSNRL and Leeson, on the other hand, probably would be happy to take it. Leeson might be hoping to reserve his cash for the Camden and Amboy, though, so he might pass pretty early. BS going up to 130. Phoenix joining, Leeson staying in it for now, and all the players staying in it. Leeson now passes, kind of as expected, and it looks like it goes for 155 to BSNRL. So he's safe from the B&O, and will have cash to float with unassisted. The Camden Amboy is contested between the three remaining players. Phoenix, really no danger, doesn't really need to Phoenix is not invested in this auction. BSNRL is, but he's going to be passing. He doesn't need this, and he's not obligated to price enforce. The other two players are motivated. One of them is going to be ending up with a B&O. Grimaldus bidding. Leeson responds up to 220, He's just cutting some of the intervening bids. BSN should absolutely pass here. He does. Grimaldis going up to 225, and we'll see how high they're willing to take it. Grimaldis is in a rough spot. If he doesn't win this, he's given Leeson priority and the private, so he needs to bid it up to enough that Leeson probably doesn't have 335, which is a tall order. That's a very expensive Camden and Amboy. Um, we'll see if that actually comes to pass. It does not. He wins it for 240, very reasonable price for the private, and he will, as a result, be able to pick up the PRR and float in stock round one, which is immediately what happens. He pars it for 71. If I was him, I probably would be parring it for lower than this. I would like to give myself the best opportunity to float or operate last in the first operating round. But having said that, BS only has 405, so he's probably going to be parring at 67 anyways and operating behind you. And if you try and sandbag and just wait for other players to float and don't float the PRR in this first opportunity, you're going to lose the company. So, if he's not able to operate last, I guess it probably makes sense to float for a little bit higher, have a little bit more cash in the company for your expensive permanent private train buy-in. BS, he takes the NYC. Does have to be a little bit careful that Phoenix doesn't just start the NYNH and um, mess him up, basically, which is what happens. So we'll see if Phoenix wants to play friendly or if he's going to lay track for the B&M. Grimaldis probably just sitting on cash here, and he does. We'll see the other players floating their companies. And PRR is floated. The other two have 2 shares left to buy. And Grimaldis now has to decide whether or not he wants to buy any of these shares. I think it's reasonable to wait until stock round 2 to start spreading your cash around. I don't know that you want to wait until you have $400 to float the B&O. Probably not going to see that happen. So he is now buying his own B&O shares. That's weird. And he's going to buy 5 shares, it looks like. That's really weird. Going to take him a long time. Uh, 2 more operating rounds before he can buy his 6th share. I don't imagine that, well, maybe someone will help him out, but he could buy paying shares and have his private revenue. Instead, he's going to have no paying shares, it looks like. This leaves Leeson with priority, and he will be operating the PRR. He heads over to Lancaster, buys a single 2 train, NYC, heading down to New York, but no guarantee he gets there. Also buys a single 2 NYNH. He, as kind of expected, screws over the NYC and is heading towards Providence. Does he buy 3 2 trains? Just 1. So bad news for the NYC, but this is why you don't par this company in the same stock round that the NYNH is. Everybody but Phoenix probably passing here. And he picks up PRR. Grimaldis, he is still short of the B&O and is passing. He will have priority and probably floats the B&O in the next stock round. PRR, Loving Life heading to Lancaster, and enough trains have been bought now that I think he could buy into the 3s if he wanted. He cannot. So probably just sits on the single 2 train. He does buy a 2. This opens up the 3s for the other players if they want to take that opportunity. Probably a mistake. New York, falling back and doesn't even lay track, cannot lay track because green is not broken, so he's in trouble. NYNH probably laying Providence. He does. And he's running just a single 2 train. So I don't know really why you would lay Providence unless you're hoping to float the B&M in this stock round. Phoenix has a pretty cheap private. He would have to sell very heavily out of the NYNH to float the B&M, and that would be a very healthy NYNH that would be cheap for another player to pick up. So I don't think he's going to do that. So the reason I question this is because, one, you only have 1 train, so even if you token and lay Providence, you're not running it. And 2, to run it, you're now going to have to buy a bunch of 2 trains, which you otherwise wouldn't really want. The B&O would buy the 2 trains for you. So he basically has wasted $80 in my opinion. B&O is now floated, and we'll see if the other players just sit on their cash. Leeson, he's going to buy an NYC. Of all the companies to buy, why buy this one? It's not going to be running. That's weird. And he sells it. So he buys it from the IPO, takes a $9 hit, and sells it immediately, putting a cheap market share for someone else to buy, which is going to cost him priority and doesn't really hurt BSNR very much. That's weird. And he can't buy paying share now because he lost liquidity. Yeah, I don't get that. BS passing Phoenix. Does he buy that cheap NYC market? Instead, selling a PRR and buying a BO. Okay. This company is also not going to be operating in this stock round, or this operating round. And this potentially leaves Grimaldus with priority. He's happy with this. Weird decision making from these players, selling paying shares for worse shares. B&O operating. Um, this is a common dilemma as the B&O player. Where do you go now that the PRR has secured Lancaster? I think it's good news that the C&O has not floated in this game. It makes it much more likely that you will be able to get into Lancaster. So maybe you lay to Atlantic City and then upgrade Baltimore and then hope to upgrade the track between Altoona and Lancaster in the next OR. Looks like he's potentially taking that approach. And he buys a 2. This opens up the 3s pretty easily. He buys both 2s and a 3. So he'll be able to buy in his private, but it's just the Schuylkill. It's really not worth doing this for just $40. NYNH, he is buying his private. He can teleport down to Scranton if he wants. Would potentially get him the Reading and Allentown track. And he's going to upgrade New York. That helps his run. Probably not going to be seeing the NYC hitting New York in the foreseeable future because I imagine the NYNH is going to lay a tight turn towards Reading and Allentown on his next operation. He's running for 70 and he pays out. He buys a 3 as well, just doesn't want to be caught trainless. PRR, does he upgrade Lancaster? Instead, looks like he's going to be laying Philadelphia. Makes the classic blunder, along with Land Wars in Asia, of laying Philadelphia with the second city pointing towards New York. So he's blocked himself, and he actually helps the B&O player, who's going to be able to run into New York in brown. This hurts the B&O in green, but B&O is probably going to be running out of Baltimore for enough money anyways. I don't know that he cares that much. PRR paying for 90. More importantly, by not upgrading the Lancaster and upgrading Philadelphia, he's going to lose out on this Reading and Allentown track, most likely. So could see a PRR with absolutely no access to New York in this game. He buys a 3. NYC can upgrade to start heading to New York, but will once again be falling back without a train or without a run. He exchanges the Mohawk and Hudson instead of buying it in. That is pretty crazy. I think that is the wrong decision. And he will buy the Champlain at St. Lawrence. Doesn't use its special ability just yet. Grimaldus with $100 can buy paying share, but can't float anything realistically. Buying a PRR. PRR is going to have some pretty good revenue, so reasonable. Leeson, he's probably going to sell at least one share and float something. What is he looking to float? Potentially B&M, or actually the C&O. C&O is a great company. He has kind of screwed it with the track decisions of the PRR, but still probably better than the B&M long term would be my guess. He's buying paying shares. Is he going to do some stock trashing and then float? He's probably not got any competition for floating, so he could take that time to do that if he wanted. BSNRL somehow sitting on 70% of the NYC. Very questionable. Buying a PRR. Phoenix also buying a PRR may see the PRR float up, which would be bad news for Phoenix. I think he wants to make sure that the NYNH operates before PRR so that he can get that Reading and Allentown track. So maybe buying a share with the intention of trashing it. Grimaldus passing. Leeson, he is probably trying to make the PRR operate before the NYNH, but only trashing it one share is not going to be enough to guarantee that. So if the Phoenix player wants to play hardball, what he can do is buy a PRR and then sell one NYNH and sell 2 PRRs, which is going to guarantee that the NYNH operates before the PRR. So The reason I say that you may have to do it that way is because if you aren't careful and you just sell down the PRR twice, you may run into a situation where one of these other random players, kind of third parties, just randomly tanks your NYNH after that, and then you're stuck operating behind the PRR. So maybe this is too conservative, selling your own NYNH, which is just running pretty well. But these are the kind of things that I end up doing in games to ensure that I get the operating order I want. I think it probably costs me games sometimes playing so conservatively, but I am, I guess, just overly paranoid. Lee Sin, is he floating now? He sells the PRR, so doing BSN's or Phoenix's job for him, and he does take the CNO as expected. BSN, he buys an NYNH. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm a little bit worried that if Phoenix doesn't sell an NYNH down before the PRR, that BSN will do something kind of random and mess up with his operating order. I think the Reading and Allentown track is definitely worth selling a share for. Phoenix, he's passing. That's weird. Leeson continue to float. And it looks like everybody's just going to let him do it. Right now, the NYNH is still operating before the PRR. So I guess Phoenix is happy with that. But what is he going to do with all the cash he's sitting on? He's just going to sit on it. To be fair to him, I don't know that there was a great opportunity for investing his cash in this stock round. It does hurt um, to just sit on cash. Probably he could have been safe buying another B&O. I think it's very likely it'll pay out and he'll recoup his $10 deficit. I would not be buying NYC, would not be buying CNO other than to trash it. And I guess you could buy a PRR too, unless he had sold that. I don't think he did though. So he had some opportunities. I'm a little bit surprised to see him sitting on cash. He does not quite have priority. He's going to be operating second. So also wasn't at risk of losing priority by buying shares either. B&O's operation would like to see him upgrade Baltimore here and start pressuring towards Lancaster. Instead, he's going to lay toward Washington. That does give him another route, which is important, but he loses some tempo. Now that the CNO is floated, you may see the CNO rushing over to Pittsburgh with the cooperation of PRR. So I think he is under the gun in terms of getting some tokens north of Baltimore to secure his late game runs. He pays out 120, pretty good revenue. First operation of the CNO, does he take the number 2? He does. So that's going to delay his income, but he's going to be heading over to Pittsburgh in the next operation probably. This does mean that potentially Lancaster is not upgraded if PRR wants to help him by laying Pittsburgh, which helps the B&O a little bit, but I fear for the B&O's potential in this game. I think the Washington track lay is really going to hurt him. He buys a 3. Does he buy into the 4s? No. So we will see the 4s or the 3s running, or sorry, the 2s running, which makes sense because he has 2 of them and has track for them. NYNH probably heading down towards Reading and Allentown. Instead, linking up with Albany. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, it gives you a little more revenue. You can hit New York twice, but you could have hit New York twice in the next operation and really had great late game potential with track on Reading and Allentown. I don't know. He runs for 180 and he pays that out. PRR, he's upgrading Lancaster, so we'll be getting the Reading and Allentown, but not helping the CNO. This potentially allows the B&O to sneak into Lancaster ahead of the CNO. So I don't like the way the NYNH or the PRR have made their decisions in this operating round. I think both of them could have played that differently. Paying for 110, NYC. He is heading over to Rochester, probably going to secure the token there in the next operation, and just running one of his trains for 90, which he pays out. He buys the 4 Rust the trains. He is now out of orange, so unless he withholds, he's going to have to sell that share that he kind of exchanged a very valuable private for. B&O just running 1 train now. Does he upgrade his home? He does. And he still has the opportunity of getting into Lancaster ahead of the CNO, but it's going to be close. He lays a token on Washington. Why do you do that? Just mind blowing. Running 1 train, don't need the token, just throwing it away. Okay. buying a 4, so he's going to be train locked without permanent train money, very dangerous. C&O, he is heading slowly over to Lancaster, going to be running for only 40, and he pays that out. NYNH, he is now upgrading Providence, again, doing the B&M's work for it, and he is not guaranteed to be running the B&M. It is probably likely, though, because I don't think BSN is going to be in a position to float, so I guess if you're expecting to be having the presidency, it makes sense to lay the track, but you need to make sure you get that presidency. And the other thing, oh no, okay. I was going to say the NYC could potentially token the B&M out, but it's not going to happen until Brown at least. So running his 3 train for 100 and paying out. PRR laying Reddington and Altown. So he does get a run into New York at least, and he's going to be running for 100, which he pays out. NYC links up with Rochester, finally able to run both of his trains. Does he token there? He does, and is very poor as a result. He pays out and is not even in yellow now. He's going to have to sell a share in the NYC as predicted and is close to being able to float. Does he take the B&M here? Instead buying a B&O and just trashing it. So getting 12 extra dollars, but losing tempo and potentially priority as a result. Phoenix, he is selling out, probably taking the B&M, which he pars for 100, so that works out for him. He actually can't float it without selling more shares, so may see him do that. If he knows he has to sell the NYNH, I'm surprised he doesn't sell it now. It could be tanked by someone else who's just looking to pick up an extra $8. Grimaldis, he's buying the NYC market. Leeson, buying that NYNH, could see him trash it. He does immediately, so as mentioned, Phoenix should have sold that. BSN, also buying an NYNH, also trashing it, but he doesn't hurt its stock value, just getting himself $3. So this is the type of move I've really harped on this in the past, and I will have to move on eventually, but for now I'm sticking to my guns. This is the kind of move that really loses you the game. You're losing stock actions, you're not really hurting the other players. $3 is just not worth an action in the stock round. It just isn't. Phoenix, he is buying a B&M, Grimaldis, and now he sells his NYH, so a little bit of a lost efficiency. Not the end of the world for him, but just nitpicking. Grimaldis, he buys a C&O. Leeson buying a B&O that has been sold, and BSN is going to have to spread his cash somewhere. He's sold out of 2 companies already. Phoenix now has money to float. Grimaldis passing Leeson, last share for him. It's going to be a B&O, and he trashes it. BSN passing, just sitting on cash. Is he saving up cash to trash the B&M? Potentially. There's 2 4s left, so I don't know that they need to worry too much about the 5 train popping out. Phoenix almost floated. Grimaldis passing. Leeson buying his own PRR. BSN passing. B&M is now floated, and he immediately sells a share. I like that move. No sense in sitting on 6 non-paying shares, and you can maintain your presidency here. Gives him cash to buy a paying share. A lot of these shares have been trashed, so they'll be a little bit cheaper for him when he buys them. Leeson buys the B&M, probably just going to sell it down to trash it, which he does, and BSN will probably be doing the same thing. He's passing for now, and Phoenix actually passes. So maybe hoping to save priority and go second in priority again. Leeson buying an NYC. Is BSN just passing? He is. So Phoenix floats a company and is able to go second in priority. BSN is sitting on a ton of cash for no reason, and Leeson is sitting in a pretty good position, going to be able to get the token in Lancaster out of against the B&O. So I think 2 players are probably functionally eliminated at this point, the NYC and the B&O, and it'll come down to Leeson and Phoenix most likely. Lancaster tokened as expected. Better run for the C&O finally. He's going to be paying out 100. First operation of the B&M, it's probably going to be buying a 4 train. Could shuffle trains with the NYNH. Actually could not. Well, couldn't if he doesn't want to fall back at least. And he is laying expensive track. I don't know why he's doing that. and buys the 4. B&O lost out on tokens, could head to Pittsburgh, probably will just for a better run. Um, but because the PRR and the CNO are cooperating, a token in Pittsburgh is really not going to be very effective for him. May want to hold on to that token for Philadelphia in Brown. And he actually lays the track the wrong way, is hitting Lancaster instead of Pittsburgh. Of course, he's never going to be able to run into Lancaster or run through Lancaster. And this also opens up a better run for both the PRR and the CNO. So, not sure why you would lay that instead of the gentle curve heading west. Running 2 trains for 190, which he pays out PRR. Upgrades Pittsburgh and pays out for 120, taking advantage of the track so helpfully laid for him by the B&O player. These type of moves are the things that put you in last place. NYNH, he is looking to bypass Rochester and running for 100. Still has his token, just playing conservatively sitting on that. Has a better run than 100, could be running for 110 up to Rochester instead of hitting this DIT. So a little bit of inefficiency there. NYC, he links up with Boston and is going to be running his trains much better as a result of the B&M player laying expensive track for him. Pays out 170. CNO, he is finally getting over to Chicago. Not going to be able to run it for a while, but in the late game, going to be appreciating the slow track or the opportunity now to lay this track. Paying for 120, courtesy of the B&O once again. B&O upgrading Washington, gets an extra $10 for his run, and is paying for 200. B&M, he is looking to potentially get into Scranton and contend for the tile placement on Philadelphia. He's going to be competing against a bunch of companies for this. And he also potentially allows them to get into Albany if he does succeed. So needs to be quite careful. Running for 130, which he pays out. Leeson looking to bypass Cleveland with the PRR eventually. And running for 120. NYNH, he actually does lay Scranton. Did he not buy in his private? He did. Okay, so he's just using the special ability. Gets himself a discount. So actually, if he's able to token with both the B&M and the NYNH on Scranton, that could be quite powerful. No guarantee that the Philadelphia track works out the way he wants, but I was missing that the B&M and the NYNH were cooperating with the DNH for this. So a little bit more viable than I would have thought. Probably still not the best move, but it'll be interesting to see at least. He, so he doesn't even spend the token. So if you're going to use the private to lay that track, you should absolutely be spending the token because it's free. Otherwise, you're just spending $120 for track. You might as well not even use the private. So after giving him the benefit of the doubt, he proceeds to disappoint. Running for 100, which he pays out. He buys the second to last 4. Will have 2 trains, but needs to be careful he doesn't bankrupt. Doesn't have a whole lot of cash for permanent trains. Sorry, he bought it from the B&M, not from the market. So B&M's can buy the 4 and the 5, but the other players are seeing this happen and can plan accordingly. Are any of them in a position to float? BSN could float the Erie, could also float the CPR as a suitcase. He has the Champlain and St. Lawrence. And Grimaldus and Leeson are also not far behind in terms of float opportunities. So we may see both of these companies float. If BSN is anticipating another company float, I think he has to take the Erie and then kill the CPR by laying track for it, which it looks like he already did. So yeah, he should be taking the Erie. Erie and the NYC is usually a decent combination. Unfortunately, he had to token Rochester. He upgrades Boston, going to be getting a little bit more cash, pays out for 200 into the next stock round. Expect to see him selling a share and then floating the Erie for max, which is what happens. Phoenix, probably just buying paying shares. And he's actually going to buy an Erie. Yeah, you can trash the value, but you're helping him not have to invest as much capital. Operating order here is going to be very important. Um, I think he probably wants the B&M to operate after these newly floated companies. There's a chance that the and Erie buys the 4 and then a 5, and the B&M can pick up a 5 without having to buy the 4, leaves himself an extra $300 for eventual permanent train in the NYNH. So I don't know that he really wants to trash the Erie very much. Its current operation would be fine with him, I think. He does sell it, so if it operates at 90, he's still happy, but if it operates after the B&M, that's very dangerous because he's in a position where he has to buy into the fives, and then he could potentially give both fives to the Erie, which is dangerous. Grimaldis, he is buying a CNO, just buying paying shares. Also getting 18 bucks to do it. May look to trash the CNO. Again, operating order here is quite important. I think that he wants the CNO to operate early, though. I don't think he wants it to sell down and operate after these newly floated companies because then it's in contention for five trains. So he needs to be careful. Leeson, he's buying his own. Oh, sorry, he sells a PRR. Is he looking to float the CPR? He does. Ooh, so a little bit dangerous. Puts him in contention for some five trains, but he's going to have to run the CPR now, and it's very hard to have good revenues for a long time with the CPR. BSN probably floating the Erie still. He does. Phoenix buying a CPR. I assume he's going to be trashing this as well. With two companies floating ahead of him, he needs to be a little bit careful. Also, now that the CNO has another presidency, the CNO has the opportunity to buy a four and then let the CPR buy both fives. So now I think he is hoping to trash at least one of these companies below the B&M. And he's not going to accomplish that by selling it down just once. Grimaldis, he's buying a CNO, so he's going to float that up. Okay. Does he just sell it down now to hurt Leeson's net worth and make it operate after all these newly floated companies? I think that's what I would do. And he does, so he's paying attention. Good. Leeson, he is buying an NYC and, oh, sorry, he sells an NYC and now has a little bit more cash to floating the CPR and is able to accomplish that. BSN still floating Erie, correct. Phoenix, he is now buying his own shares and sells it. What? What is this? So he buys it from the market and then sells it from the market. Um, doesn't change his operating order, doesn't get any cash by doing it, just an entirely wasted action. I don't know what that is. Grimaldis, passing. So if I'm one of the companies floating, I'm a little bit worried when I see this. He might be looking to just trash you like 30% of your value. Leeson buys a B&M. He's probably going to trash this. He does. So operating order is incredibly important in this operating round, and he has guaranteed that the B&M is going to be operating very late behind, five, maybe six companies. So unlikely that B&M is going to see a five, may have to buy the first six. Erie's now floated. Phoenix buying a B&O. Grimaldis passing still. Leeson buying a B&O as well, probably trashing this, which he does. So that makes it operate after the PRR and the NYNH. BSN, he's investing in the B&O that was just sold. Phoenix, buying a B&M, buying the cheap sold share. And Grimaldis, he is now investing in the NYC. So I would like to see him do some stock trashing. He, lost a lot of tempo in this stock round by just sitting on his cash. I assume we'll still see that. Sorry, he sold, not bought, and now he's buying the CPR. Going to force the issue to float this. Leeson buying a CPR for 100. And BSN is selling down the Erie. This is a vulnerable presidency. Grimaldis could steal it. And he buys the CPR. Does he trash it? Just going to sit on it for now. Phoenix passing. Grimaldis buys an NYNH. Leeson buying an Erie from the market could trash this again, but who does he want to operate? He probably wants to operate after the Erie. I don't think he wants to operate before it, so I don't know that he's super incentivized to trash his share, but he does. Erie now going to be operating after his PRR um, and ahead of the CNO, so maybe looking to have the fives bought up by the CNO, or at least one five. I don't know. CPR operating first is not ideal for him. I don't think he wants to buy a four. Everybody's passing except for Grimaldus, who has all this cash. And he is tanking the CPR, but it's still operating ahead of everybody. Leeson buying an NYNH. Grimaldus passes. So Grimaldus is sitting on $400 plus, right? Yeah. That's strange. Leeson has a huge share lead. Is in a little bit of a rough spot for permanent trains. Needs to pick up two fives at least, I think, and he should be able to do that. CPR operates first, buys a 4 and a 5, and then no. So CNO will not be able to pick up a 5 if he does that. Be curious to see how this works out. He buys a 4 and then a 5. PRR not going to be able to buy a 5. He lays Philadelphia, and Trenton is able to secure that tile. So that is something that I didn't comment on, is that this is another important factor of the train rush. Does he token in Philadelphia? He may want to prevent the NYC or the NYNH and B&M from getting down there, and this will leave him one more token to potentially throw on Albany, which would mess with the other players. So he does secure that token. So the best laid plans of Phoenix are totally blown up here. Well played to Leeson. And he pays for 130. NYNH. He is looking to bypass Albany, it looks like, paying for 240. B&O, he has missed out on a lot of track opportunities and will be upgrading his home for a little bit more money. Paying for 280. Can't withhold for a permanent train. He's going to have to wait for the 6 to rest his 3. B&M should be picking up a 5 here and completes the bypass of Albany and can double token with the next stock round with the NYNH potentially. PRR might have something to say about that. Does not have cash for a per token though, so it's not going to be able to do it just yet. B&M buys the 5, has cash left over. Erie's first operation, he can buy a 5 and is not going to be able to bring out the 6. So do we see a little bit of a stall here? Probably not. I imagine that Leeson brings out the 6 with the CNO just paying should be enough. That will not force out a D. Everybody has a 4 train that also has a 3. He's running 2 3s, so maybe not motivated to bring out the 6. Could just sit and let the train stall here a little bit. He has a huge share lead, so the status quo is benefiting him. Erie buys a 5 and doesn't lay himself track. That's weird. Erie is the NYC player, so he could look to buy the 5 over into the NYC, but he's train locked. Yeah, I'm not sure why he doesn't lay any track there. CNO upgrading Lancaster, has a better run, and runs for 150, which he pays out. Does have 6 train money. Does he buy it? He does. Okay. So he's going to be running a train in each of his companies. It's not that far off a second 6 in the CPR. May need to withhold a couple times to do that. B&O could buy a 6 with a withhold, but it's going to take him a while to get D train money, and nobody else is really in a position to buy a D train. Erie didn't even lay track, so he's not going to be able to withhold with that company. NYC, last company to operate. He upgrades Albany and running for 150, pays it out. PRR running the first 5. He is blocking the B&O from heading west. Yet more missed opportunities from the B&O. And he gets 220 from his 5 train. Pays it out. NYNH, upgrade Scranton, probably tokens there. Passes for now. I think the token in Philadelphia really kind of negated his long-term strategy here. Withholds 150, not going to be enough for the 6. CNO could be looking just to get into Chicago, alternatively could upgrade New York, which he does, and he's running great track for 250. He withholds, just preparing for the eventual third permanent train he's going to require. He's shuffling money into the CPR, could force buy a 6, which is going to put other players really on the ropes in terms of falling on D trains. Lays Ottawa, and he does buy the 6. So someone is going to have to bring out a D. Um, that's going to hurt Grimaldus, and, well, it hurts everyone except for Leeson. Leeson probably wins this game now, has played the train rush very well. Bino, he is looking to eventually bypass the blockade set up for him by the CPR and PRR and CNO, and is going to have to pay expensive track to do it when he is looking at a D train. He runs for 160, 170, and he withholds. Too little, too late. He's going to eventually have to get a D, just one turn behind finding a 6. B&M, he is just optimizing his runs and pays for 210. Erie, still not having any track. This is probably a kind of an aborted attempt at suitcasing the Erie. I don't think it's going to work out for him. And he actually buys a train against operating order, even though he doesn't need to. He is able to shuffle some cash into the NYC, but it's painful. He withholds, and he can upgrade for the D at least. But he doesn't have track really for the Erie, and doesn't look like he's going to be getting any. So we will see two players having to out-of-pocket D trains, Grimaldus and Phoenix. They are already trailing Leeson and probably will continue to trail him for the rest of the game. I think in this situation, probably okay to call this game. I don't see a way for Leeson to lose at this point. He'll probably hit his cert limit here. NYC, or BSN, who's running the NYC, he sells the Erie, so looking to suitcase it. We'll see if the other players let him get away with that. And he's not even buying any shares. Okay. Phoenix, passing as well. Grimaldus passing. Leeson, buying an NYC. And everybody's just sitting on their cash. I mean, on the one hand, you're anticipating having to buy a D train, so you want to have the cash, but you're letting Leeson get his pick of the litter and the remaining shares, and also potentially foregoing revenue or stock appreciation prior to your purchase. So just looking at Grimaldus, for instance, the B&O is operating fairly late in turn order, buying the PRR, the NYC, or the NYNH, the CNO, or the B&M would potentially get him more cash than he has now. For instance, the PRR, it's going to be paying out and appreciating its stock value. It's also safe to buy it because you'd sell it before the next stock round. But it doesn't look like he's going to do that. Leeson 1 share away from being cert locked, and everybody's happy to let him do that. And he's actually buying yellow shares now, because why not? He sells the NYC, puts it into yellow. I'm a little bit surprised to see that. What is he going to buy instead? Now the other players are joining the game again and just trashing shares that don't really matter. Phoenix and Grimaldus still passing. Leeson buys a PRR. BSN is passing, so very strange stock round. A lot of missed opportunities from a lot of players there. PRR, upgrading Pittsburgh. All the brown cities are now taken, and he runs for 240, pays it out. So B&O, Grimaldus, and Phoenix missed out on opportunities for extra cash here. NYNH is going to be forced to buy a D train or shuffle, but shuffling is just going to be a downward spiral for him. He is passing track and has to sell shares and buys the 6, or buys the D. 6 train now from Leeson. He is heading up to Erie to break the suitcase, paying for 250. B&O, he links up with Pittsburgh, putting himself further from a D train. He could have token there as well, but doesn't see the need for now. And he's going to have to sell shares to buy the D. So everybody has their trains. We won't see a bankruptcy, but Leeson should be super far ahead now. And he is like 4 times the net worth of the two trailing players, almost double of his next nearest competitor, who actually is going to be falling back yet again. B&M, he is just laying track. CPR probably heading over to Hamilton, Toronto, as a result of the Erie player doing nothing for the past couple operating rounds, is probably going to be able to get into Hamilton, Toronto uncontested. Will need cash to do it. Not the end of the world for Leeson to withhold. He probably wants to be in yellow now that he's at his cert limit anyways. And he does withhold as expected. NYC running 2 trains, looking to head towards Pittsburgh, and pays out 420, but is only going to be doing that once. Probably needs to start running the Erie. Not going to do it just yet. Going to force the other players to wake him up. PRR obliging and running for 240, paying it out. CNO probably finally getting the Erie track, which he does, and actually turns it away, so it doesn't have track just yet, and as a result has very poor runs for the rest of the game probably. Pays for 260. NYNH looking to potentially bypass Rochester, it looks like. Still sitting on a token, should have token money after this run. B&M is going to cooperate with the NYNH. B&O doesn't have token money. It can be a while before he gets it, but probably eyeing this token on Dunkirk greedily, but no guarantee he's able to get that. Erie is basically a dead company at this point. Could upgrade here and look to get some track as a result that way, but he has no money in the company, so not going to be able to lay a token before someone else does probably. Paying out for 290 on the B&O. NYC running 2 trains again and looking towards Pittsburgh. CPR heading towards Hamilton, Toronto. And does he withhold again? Probably should. He does. Good. Erie is still just unwilling to lay himself track. PRR. He is blocking the NYC, the B&M, and the NYNH from getting to Pittsburgh. Should be successful with this, with a second track lay by the CNO. And he continues to pay for 240. CNO completes the block. There is actually a valid upgrade for this, but it's been laid already, so that is a dead letter. And he tokens Dunkirk, so B&O's aspirations are done. Paying for 260. NYNH running a D does finally link the Erie in and secures the token in Scranton, so his runs are pretty secure. Paying for 320. B&M, he is able to bypass Scranton and get a pretty nice 5-run for himself. It actually makes more sense to hit Scranton than it does this DIT, though, so we'll see if he adjusts that. He does. Good. B&O, he doesn't have much track left. Could look to head to Chicago, but very easily blocked by both the PR and the CNO. 290 being paid out. NYC still running 2 trains, but this is the last time that's going to happen. And potentially looking to lay the $120 track and then get into Pittsburgh with some upgrades, but should be pretty easy to block that as well. CPR lays Hamilton and paying out 120. Erie now forced to buy a train over. Does he end up in Brown? He does not. I was going to say, if he ended up in Brown and lost that presidency after buying the permanent train, that would be an absolute disaster. Who would do it? He has priority, so actually it wouldn't be the end of the world for him to end up in Brown. So probably buying his own Erie shares, I think. Instead of going to buy NYNH. Phoenix, also buying the NYNH. Grimaldus, passing. I think he's frustrated and maybe just quit the game. He's still been taking actions in the operating rounds, but it doesn't make sense for him to pass otherwise. Leeson, as a result of entering yellow with the CPR, is able to exceed his cert limit and is going to be pulling further ahead of the other players. There's enough cash in the bank pool that unfortunately the bank probably won't break in this set of operating rounds. We'll see how this stock round plays out, and then we may just skip to the end of the game. He is buying an Erie, so going to pressure the presidency and also just ensure that he's able to exceed his cert limit by the maximum amount. BSN, he is buying the Erie market. Phoenix, buying B&M. Grimalda's still passing, and Erie is getting sold out. BSN has to defend his presidency. I don't know that Leeson needs to continue pressing here. May look towards the cheaper non-yellow shares at this point. Could even buy his own CPR and then come back for the Erie at the end. Phoenix buying his own shares still. And Leeson buys a B&M. BSN passing somehow. Too many players are sitting on too much cash. I think they've given up on this game, which means that we probably should also give up on this game in terms of our commentary, but we'll play out the stock round. Buying an NYNH, Leeson, buying the B&O, BSN, buying Erie, so he's actually buying the expensive IPO shares. No need for him to be doing that, really. He's not at risk of hitting the cert limit, and there are better shares available to him. Phoenix buying the NYC. Leeson is also buying the Erie IPO, similar to BSN. I don't think he needs to be doing this. BSN is now floating up the Erie. This is a nightmare scenario for a player hoping to stay brown. Floating up means that it's extra withholds to stay in the yellow zone of the market. Phoenix buying the NYC, which will also be floating up. Leeson has bought his CPR market. Surprised he didn't do that earlier. And B&M close to floating as well. CNO, 2 shares left. Leeson can't buy either one of those. And will instead buy an NYNH, which is now sold out. Phoenix does have a dump opportunity with the NYNH, operating ahead of the B&M, and could dump it on the leader Leeson, but what shares is he going to buy? Really, there's not going to be much left after this stock round. Phoenix passing. Leeson buys his last share potentially. Could continue buying CPR shares, but just one of them. BSN, he buys a B&O, and he does buy a CPR. So Leeson has bought all the shares he can. BSN has a few more he can buy, buying the B&M, and he's going to pass. So we're into the next operating round. There is $9,000 in the bank. Companies have good runs, but I don't think it's going to be enough to break the bank. So let's just skip this operating round. Look at the revenues. Leeson far ahead of the other players and should easily take this game. Is there any potential for anybody to do anything? NYNH did manage to get down into Pittsburgh, the NYC managed that. He is running a D train there, so that's good for him. BSN is $1,000 behind Leeson, and the revenue is only 380, so probably not enough to get him back into the game. I think the only way Leeson is in danger here is if someone were to dump a company on him. He has dumpable companies in the NYNH only, and I don't think Phoenix wants to do it. So I think we skip the rest of this operating round into the last stock round and just see. NYNH is not being dumped. Leeson is 4 shares over his cert limit and $1,400 ahead. He's going to have to sell down. He could sell one Erie and get back under his cert limit pretty easily that way. So there's going to be no way for the other players to overtake him. We will skip to the end of the stock round and just look at the spreadsheet. Leeson makes the most money in the stock round even and manages to maintain his share lead. So this game's over. Leeson has won it. We'll skip to the end and congratulate Leeson. He played well. There's a lot of sloppy play. I think Romaldus ended up giving up at some point. It looks like he even lost his presidency at some point. So don't really like that. I think that's, sour grapes. But the game was over, as we noted, so I understand why he did it. There was a lot of bad play in the stock round, some bad decision making on track. B&O in particular lost out on Lancaster tokens, and NYNH lost out on the Reading and Allentown. And decisions like that, combined over the course of a game, end up in a victory for Leeson. So he reaps the benefit. Well played to the players. We will be back with additional commentary in the future. Thanks for listening.